I'm just saying, how are you, buddy? I hope all well.
Hello, Mrinal. Good to see you. Yes.
Yeah, all well.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll put my camera off, and I'll probably put my audio off. So we can chat afterwards. Yeah.
Sounds
All
good.
right. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Good evening, Deepa sir.
Hi, Ashima. How are you?
I'm fine, sir. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for allowing today to join your session.
Sure.
So, gentlemen, we are live on YouTube. And Ankit, probably you can start recording as well.
Certainly, sir.
Do we go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Fantastic. Good evening, my dear dosts. Good evening, my dear audience, and a very, very warm namaskar. And as I see my very mentor on the audience screen, pronouns to Mr. Arun Agarwal. Sir, thank you very much for gracing this webinar and being with us. Many, many thanks. My name is Pradeep Mazumdar, and I am the director for the School of Hospitality and Hotel Management in Shoolini University. And before anything else, it is always important, just a little introduction of my university. A decade old, born September 2009 under University Grants Commission Act, founded and run by academicians, not for profit, 4,000 students, 2,000 students on campus, 5 faculties, 12 schools, 200 plus eminent and distinguished professors. And Shoolini University is nestled in the lap of the Himalaya Hills, just about an hour and a half away from the bustling Chandigarh city, 20 kilometers outside Solan on the beautiful hills of Bajhol amidst Sidar and Deodhar. Our topic this evening, ladies and gentlemen, is innovations in online teaching and learning. And the reason I have chosen this topic is because COVID-19 has completely changed our life. It has taught mankind a new way of life. COVID-19 has taught academicians a new way of pedagogy. Certain burning questions now have come up in front of us. How do we pivot from an in-person classroom to a digital or a virtual one? What could be the strategies and best practices in online teaching which we need to be aware of? And to help us explore all of these burning questions, it is my immense privilege and honor to be inviting a very, very famous global speaker of repute, Professor Deepra Jha, all the way from the United States of America. Let me begin by saying Professor Deepra Jha is not only a global scholar, not only is he an internationally renowned expert in luxury hospitality, but to me, he is first and foremost my college mate with whom I would sit in a roadside dhaba having a kullar of chai. So that's what Deepra Jha is to me. I had the pleasure of hosting Professor Deepra in 2018 here in my university for an absolutely mesmerizing Guru Series talk. And this time I have the pleasure of hosting him over Zoom, unfortunately through a 10.5-hour time difference. Professor Deepra Jha, good morning. It's 9:05 a.m. out there. Professor Jha's professional credentials. He is currently transitioning from his position at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln into a new position at the Washington State University's Carson College of Business. If I'm not mistaken, on the 15th of August, he joins Washington State University as a scholarly associate professor and the assistant director of the School of Hospitality Business Management. And for those of you who track global hospitality education, you'll be very happy to know that the Washington University's School of Hospitality and Business Management consistently ranks among one of the top 10 programs in the world. Now to come closer to reality. When it comes to online teaching, Professor Jha is a pioneer in using virtual learning in hospitality education. Before COVID-19 happened, he crisscrossed the world to advise top luxury brands and various government tourism ministries. He has been an invited professor in residence at the famous Venetian mega resort in Las Vegas, as well as the Jumeirah Group in Dubai. And I know for a fact that he's a very valued advisor to my alma mater, the Oberoi Center for Learning and Development, which we fondly refer to as OCLD. Dipro, a very, very warm welcome to this seminar, my dear friend, and thank you so much for joining us, even though I know that you're transitioning between jobs and you are also planning your relocation from Nebraska to Pullman in Washington.
Thank you, Pradeep. It is my distinct pleasure and absolute honor. Thank you for this invitation.
Thank you so much. And before we get started, may I request my dear audience, if you can just kindly mute your audio so that there is no disturbance while the session is in progress. And allow me to just explain the format a little bit. The format for the evening is I have a list of questions which I will be asking Professor Jha, and my goal is to have this conversation for around roughly 40 to 45 minutes and leave time in the end for you to ask your questions through the chat feature. So if you can just put your question in the chat box, I'll try and take as many as possible within the time constraint and address it with Professor Dipro. So if we are all about warmed up, here goes the very first one for Professor Dipro Jha. Dipro, during our conversations about teaching, I remember you mentioning the concept of a teaching philosophy. Since most people in this audience are lecturers, they are from the academic world also, could you please share your own teaching philosophy and how it informs your teaching?
Sure thing. And let me begin by wishing everybody a very good evening. And once again, Pradeep, I congratulate you and your colleagues for organizing this wonderful virtual session. I know that, I can't join all of you in person, but we live in a world full of technology. So I'm delighted to be joining all of you through Zoom tonight. Your question about a teaching philosophy is extremely pertinent, and how we teach or how we create our instructional strategy has got a lot to do with the teaching philosophy. So allow me to share a few slides and take you through my teaching philosophy and why that is important. So I will just start sharing my screen, and then we can go from there. Pratik, can you see my screen?
Absolutely.
Perfect. So I am currently transitioning from one position, my current position at University of Nebraska-Lincoln, to Washington State University. And when I think about my teaching philosophy, I am extremely passionate about teaching in person as well as teaching in the virtual or online format. So this is what my typical classroom looks like. I am very engaged. I use a lot of collaborative work within my classroom. And one of the great things about being able to be upfront and close with students is to have the conversation with them. And one of the things that I have experienced throughout my instructional career is that the physical space informs the way we teach very much. So for example, here is an example of my classroom, which is very collaborative. But say when I travel all over the world, say, in this slide, I am teaching at a university in the Ukraine, and here the space is very different, and how I teach is absolutely informed by the physical space, by the audience reaction, and all of that. Like this is also very up close and personal, but different from a collaborative workspace where students are sitting around tables, talking about cases or discussing their projects and so on and so forth. Or last year, I I taught in China, and this is what that classroom looked like. Very different. One of the things you will notice is that this classroom has a gigantic camera. Actually, they have two cameras on both sides of the instructor podium, and all of the activities within the classroom are recorded. And this is in Hainan University in Hainan, China. So once again, the way we teach or I teach is very much informed by the physical space, as well as how large is the interaction, what are the group dynamics, what's the communication style, and so on and so forth. Another picture from another of my lectures. This one is in Breda University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands. Here, this venue is actually an old cathedral. It's part of this beautiful university. So here I am I'm much farther away from the audience and the students. So the way I would deliver a lecture would be very different, say from the students that I would teach in my class. And as I was preparing for this presentation, I could not stop but find this picture. It just looks absolutely nice for me, that when I was there at Shoolini University, in 2018. So just as I'm showing you this picture, I'm equally comfortable using online online methods or online teaching and learning. So it is basically here in my virtual classroom, I am using technology such as, I don't know why, why these strange scribbles are
If you
appearing
can hear me,
on
I
the
think there is
screen.
somebody who's trying to make some lines. Would you kindly exclude the gentleman or the lady from the group, please?
Right, sir.
Anyone who's not known?
Right.
Yes. So we are experiencing a classic phenomenon of Zoom bombing. That somebody who is not supposed to be, on this call is trying to create some mischief. That's fine. I will continue. So as I said, that as I am very comfortable or familiar teaching in the physical classroom, I'm equally comfortable using different forms of a virtual classroom. So here is a picture from my virtual classroom here in Nebraska, where we connect live with students and faculty from 6 countries, and then the technology that I'm holding in my hand is called a catch box. It is basically what it is. It's a throwable microphone to capture audio. So when I'm asking a question to a student, I just throw this microphone, and while this microphone is flying through the screen, it just it just shuts off, and when someone catches it, it just turns back on. So I'm very familiar with using these kinds of technology. Or here is another example where I use a telepresence robot. A telepresence robot is basically, it can move around in the classroom, and then and I can even give the control of this telepresence robot to anybody anywhere in the world. And so it's a very exciting way of teaching by bringing in guest speakers, or even helping students be aware of these kinds of technology. So the bottom line in terms of my my teaching philosophy is essentially that my personal teaching philosophy is helping students succeed. That means, by doing all of these things that I just talked about, I am just helping students succeed. It looks like the Zoom bombing is still going on. I don't know if Ankit or Dr. Kamal was able to identify the intruder and get them out.
Dipro, we have already informed him. They are trying. We'll carry on nevertheless, if that's all right by you.
Yes, absolutely. No, this is not distraction at all. So yes, basically, when I'm talking about a personal teaching philosophy, it is very important because the way we teach and the way we instruct has got a lot to do with not only the physical space, but you would want that same kinds of instructional strategy for the virtual space as well. So I hope that kind of answers your question, Pradeep. And as we keep talking, I am going to talk more about why a teaching philosophy is important.
You know, this is so insightful, whatever you have just now pictorially taken us through. This is absolute evidence of where online teaching is going. Let me now move a little bit into the specifics, Dipra, with your permission. Could you please take us through some of your strategies and pedagogy for effective and impactful online teaching?
Sure. You know, just as we talked about the teaching philosophy, it is important to actually have a very clear strategy as well as a very clear pedagogical model as we move forward in terms of teaching and learning. So the strategy that I use in terms of virtual teaching and learning is that that focusing on what students can do with what they know, and also getting really good at what I call with assessments, and then also delivering the learning in smaller bundles of skills. And the way you would do it is by using the concepts from psychology of learning, that's chunking and scaffolding. And we're going to talk about chunking and scaffolding very soon. So let's look at some of the models that are always helpful in terms of the instructional strategy. So one of the models that I like to use is the Bloom's taxonomy. And in Bloom's taxonomy, some of you are already familiar with this, is what happens with Bloom's taxonomy is that you are basically starting from a lower level of learning and going up to a higher level of learning. So you will start with the basics from any course material or subject, and they gradually help the students overcome this and go up. So that's how Bloom's taxonomy actually works. So as you can see, that basically it starts with just recognizing basic facts, then understanding what the fact means, and then going up from there. So that's the way Bloom's taxonomy usually works. So, and along with the Bloom's taxonomy, the other one, okay. I think somebody, yeah, no, somebody has just taken over the screen. And
Ankit, are you?
Yes, sir, I am there, sir.
So this person, whoever it is, Hadia Santosh.
By mistake, he might have taken over the screen then.
Okay. So we just need to expel this
Sir,
person from
we
the
can
room.
remove him, sir. We can remove him, sir. You just need to remove him from more.
Please do.
Sir, actually, host is Dipra sir, so Dipra sir can remove him.
All right. Okay. All right.
Okay. 1 second.
I'm sure he must have done it inadvertently. He was my revenue manager, Hadia Santosh was my revenue manager in my erstwhile company. So he's obviously done it unintentionally. I know that.
Okay. Okay. Good. Good, because I wasn't sure what was actually going on. Let me get back to sharing the screen. Yeah, it is always fascinating what happens, when you are trying to, and this is a great example of what happens that
I guess this is the way we learn as we go along.
Yep. So so we are talking about Bloom's taxonomy, and basically the way Bloom's taxonomy works is that you would start with a lower level of knowledge and then gradually work through to the higher levels of knowledge. That means, when you are teaching first-year students, you will start with things like recognizing the basic facts, And then as they are going through the second years and the third years of programs, you are helping them move to a higher level of learning. Now, along with Bloom's taxonomy, you use another model, which is called the zone of proximal development. And the zone of proximal development essentially is basically a model that is used to understand where students are. So I will give you a very, very specific example of a zone of proximal development. In my previous job at North Dakota State University, I used to teach an hospitality accounting class. And that hospitality accounting class, students who came to take that class already took an accounting 102 course from the College of Business. So what I did is, because I knew that they knew the basics of accounting, like debit and credit and all of that stuff, I started from the next level, like things like cash flow statements and profit and loss and so on and so forth. But I quickly realized that many students were not actually able to grasp the concept because they needed some remedial work. So basically what happens is that while the students were here, I was trying to teach them at this level. And what the zone of proximal development helps us to do is that kind of figure out where the students are. And then you want to match it up with the Bloom's taxonomy and take people through all of these levels. So basically help them scaffold, and that's where the concept of scaffolding comes in, that you have to first develop the base of knowledge to able to move students to a higher level of knowledge. And that's how the zone of proximal development and the Bloom's taxonomy works side by side. In terms of strategy for teaching and learning, I am a big believer in disruptive pedagogy. And when what disruptive pedagogy is that it is active learning, which is both inclusive as well as engaging. That means how can we actually engage students even in a virtual learning platform? And there are different kinds of instructions, whether it is in person, whether it is online, synchronous versus asynchronous. It could be hybrid, a combination of in-person and online, and then high flex. Like my virtual classroom is an example of high flex, where I am physically in a classroom here in the United States, but I am also virtually connecting with students and faculty in 6 other countries. And so one of the things that I am hearing a lot is people can't wait to go back to the physical classroom because that's what they're used to. But I have been telling people that one of the outcome of this COVID-19 pandemic is that now there is a realization and there is a whole new context about online/virtual teaching and learning. So to be an effective instructor or a lecturer or a teacher, it is important that people get very, very comfortable with all of these methods, whether it's in person and online or hybrid or high flex and all of that. So, and finally, instructional feedback. One of the ways that I actually gather feedback is inviting colleagues from different disciplines to come sit in my classroom, both physical classroom as well as like give them co-host or invite them to actually join one of my virtual classes and give me feedback on basically what they're experiencing in terms of my teaching methods, effectiveness, and so on and so forth. So that's the strategy that I absolutely believe in. And there's another thing that I want to talk about that I routinely use in my classes, and this is more pedagogical. It's a model or a rubric. That's what I call ropes. Ropes is basically means that when you are planning your class, every class session, whether it is in person or whether it is virtual, you start with review. That means you start class with the review of what happened during the last class. Then overview. Overview means that you are going to tell the participants what is going to happen in this session. And then presentation is basically you present whatever, whatever content you are trying to teach. And even the presentation, you are going to use a chunking strategy. Chunking means you are just not speaking nonstop for 45 minutes or 50 minutes. You are breaking it up into small bundles of information, making sure the students are understanding, they are learning what they're supposed to learn. And then, of course, as you are teaching the class or the content, you are also evaluating what students are learning. And this could be formal or informal. It could be in an online, it could kind of an environment. It could be simple polls or quizzes or using the chat feature, like posing a question, like, what do you think about this? And then summary, ending the session, summarizing what the key points are, and also telling students what is going to happen in the next classroom. So this is kind of a 360-degree way of planning any given class session. And this is equally effective during an in-person classroom as well as in an online environment. And those of you attending the session this evening, you may be able to realize that we are already using some.
देखो जी, पहले स्टार्ट सेशन से पहले रिव्यू करो, फिर ओवरव्यू में क्या करने वाले हो.
Okay, somebody is talking.
Ankit, could you kindly mute everybody?
Sir, you can unmute yourself. I have muted everyone, sir.
Sure. I have unmuted myself. Professor Deepra will unmute himself. Yes, Deepra,
okay.
All yours.
Okay. Can you hear me, Pratik?
Absolutely, loud and clear.
Okay, very good. Very good. So we will continue talking about the ropes model that I was just explaining. So what happens in ropes is that if you actually structure your entire class during the entire semester using ropes, then what happens is that you are creating a continuous feedback loop to improve your teaching as you are going through the semester. And going back to this concept of chunking, like delivering information in chunks and not just speaking in a monotone or doing a lecture for 50 minutes. Those of you who are attending the session tonight might already see chunking in action. For example, Mr. Mazumdar is actually asking me a question and I am responding and sharing content with you so that, it doesn't become like a 45-minute long, just a talking head kind of an experience. So these ropes is something that I actually use extensively in my teaching, and it's very helpful to kind of know or kind of take a temperature check of what's going on in terms of student learning. There is one thing that I actually use a lot also, what I call is storytelling. Storytelling is a very powerful pedagogical tool. And the reason I use storytelling is that because I'm a big believer that people do not remember information, but they remember stories. That means just sharing content is not good enough, that you have to also create a context, like why do students need to know that? How is it effective? Where can they use it? And all of that kind of stuff. So storytelling as a pedagogical tool is a very powerful tool, but it has to be done well. So before you are going to use storytelling as a pedagogy, you have to be very clear about what the learning objective is, what the narrative is, what visual you are going to use, especially we are talking about online teaching and learning, like, the pictures that I'm sharing with you this evening. What is going to be the effect? And finally, once again, going back to the ropes, evaluation. Was the intended learning objective achieved. And let me share a very quick example of storytelling. So for example, in my senior capstone class, one of the theories I use is what we call the theory of economic distinctions, which was proffered by Pine and Gilmore. And here, this is pretty serious stuff in terms of for undergraduate students to learn in how, especially in hospitality management, how the hospitality industry is moving from a service kind of service-based approach to a more experience-based paradigm. So to help them understand, I take them through this model, and basically what I'm trying to explain to them, in typically a service sector approach, you are just looking at delivering service, whether it is, for guests staying at a hotel, you are just delivering a bundle of intangibles and you are just customizing, you are delivering it to a demand, compared to when you are talking about an experience rubric, an experience paradigm, the whole concept is to stage memories and just not deliver some intangibles. Now, I mean, the theory sounds great. It has been around for more than a decade now. A lot of people actually use this model or use this theory to basically, develop their brands or develop their service architecture. But how do we actually use the power of storytelling to help students understand that how can a simple service become an outstanding guest experience? So I share this story in my classes, which I will share with you, that I travel a lot. And one time I was traveling to China. I was staying in Macau, China at the Four Seasons Hotel for a conference. And I found out that my shoes were not very clean. And I called the housekeeping at the Four Seasons Hotel, and I asked them if they could please, get me shoe shine. And then they said that, oh, absolutely not a problem. They came and collected my shoes, and then within 45 minutes, my shoes were delivered, but they were delivered like this. So the point is that I'm trying to explain to students that how a simple service like a shoe shine can be elevated to a world-class experience. I mean, that aha moment, that it creates memories. It is just not delivering a bundle of intangibles. And so as using storytelling as a pedagogical tool, you have to be very clear in terms of what you are trying to achieve. Like, what is the learning objective in using this picture of a shoe shine at the Four Seasons Hotel? So I'm helping them glean an understanding of the theory of economic distinctions. And what's the narrative? So the narrative is theory to example crossover, that the theory sounds great, but how do we actually use that in real life? Like if I'm going to work for work in the industry in the real world, how can I use this? Visual, I mean, I'm using the theory graphics as a visual, then I'm also using the example of the shoe shine from the Four Seasons in Macau, China. What effect I'm looking for? The effect is wow, because what happens is when I show this picture, a lot of time I will ask students to go back and take a look at this picture and then engage in a discussion. This discussion could be in person in a physical classroom, or it could be in an online environment. And then, of course, how do I evaluate that if students are learning or getting the theory or not? I can do that by asking guided questions, and also things like, was the intended learning objective achieved? So once again, the idea of using storytelling as a pedagogical tool is that you are helping students glean an understanding of the context along with the content. And like I said, that people do not remember information, but they remember stories. So this has to be done very well, and it has to be very intentional. It has to be thought through, that what kind of a narrative, what kind of a visual you are kind of going to use in your storytelling as a pedagogical tool. So I'll stop here and see if there are any questions or comments, Pradeep.
No, in fact, I would like to come in here with two comments. One is on the acronym ROPES, and just a little bit of a pulling of my dear friend Dipra's leg. While you talked about ropes, it's always good to give the students a lot of rope, as long as you also keep the long end of the stick in attention. What do you say?
Yeah, that's
The other
very
one,
fun.
what I really enjoyed is about the storytelling and the way you displayed the delivery of the shoes at the Four Seasons. Now that, to my mind, is bespoke, and that bespoke also translates to the dollars at the end of the day, and those dollars translate to the gross operating profit at the end of the year. So that's really great, fantastic. This was really, may I say, validation in its truest sense of the term. I want to now move to something more specific, actually. And Dipra, you always have accomplished something that is very pioneering and very highly innovative in terms of teaching and learning. You always used to talk to me about the Global Virtual Project, GVP. So I want to know about something about this virtual exchange program. And ladies and gentlemen, before I move on to this virtual exchange program from Dipro, I have to tell you this, that during the course of our conversation, Dipro to me is always addressed as Virtual Raja. I call him the Virtual Raja. So let the Virtual Raja tell you a little bit about the virtual exchange.
Well, that is very, very kind of you, Pradeep. So I think what I need to do is just make a crown for myself and get it engraved as Virtual Raja and wear it from the next webinar onwards. So that would be.
I shall knight you, my dear friend.
Yes, yes. Thank you. So thank you for asking me about the virtual exchange. So I want to talk a little bit about virtual exchange as a teaching tool. And though my virtual exchange program connects students and faculty live around the world, this doesn't have to be between countries. I mean, Pradeep could actually teach a class in tandem with another university, another professor in Delhi or wherever else within India. And so virtual exchange can be used as a teaching tool even between two institutions in the same country or two institutions in the same city, it doesn't matter. But I will just give you a little sense of what virtual exchange is all about and how it works and so on and so forth. So the virtual exchange project that I launched was part of what we call Global Nebraska, as part of University of Nebraska's global project. So it is a transnational collaborative learning, and it is, of course, technology enabled. What we did, we used Zoom to connect through live synchronous session. We started initially with 3 countries, and then last year, my classroom in Nebraska connected with students in the United Kingdom, Denmark, and then the Ukraine, Oman, United Arab Emirates, and India. So it was fascinating to have all of these different institutions, their faculty, their students on the call. And the goal is, of course, cross-cultural learning, peer-to-peer engagement, which is very important when students are talking to one another, learning from one another. And why we do it, at least for this global project, it was to help students' acquisition of global competencies. One of the things that I constantly ask myself is that hospitality and tourism is a global discipline. So students need to actually form a global mindset. How can we actually help them do that? And the impact is phenomenal on students, on the faculty who are doing it, the institution, and of course, the community as a whole. So how do you plan for a virtual exchange? And once again, this doesn't have to be between countries. It could be just between 2 institutions, like figuring out what class would fit well in the virtual exchange format, identifying a partner who will be willing to participate in the cohort, and how would they be contributing to the project. In my case, we were trying to sync the calendars of 8 different universities, in 6 countries. So, and then of course we had time differences, like 4 time zones, and then technology compatibility and availability of bandwidth and all of that stuff. So the pedagogy for virtual exchange, this is where it becomes much more relevant, is that I have always involved an instructional designer or an academic technology specialist, because it's difficult for me to just do it on my own. Also guided peer-to-peer interactions, preparing students what to expect in a virtual exchange, if there is a dress code that they need to follow, if I'm going to be recording Zoom sessions, ask for permission. And then, of course, assessments like why are we doing this? What are students learning? What is the evidence of that kind of stuff? Like I used my introduction to the lodging industry. So this is a basically introductory hotel management class that I teach, that I taught at University of Nebraska. And so students and faculty are connecting. First time we connected with students in the United Arab Emirates, in Dubai, and with Oman. And then, last year I just talked about all of these countries: Denmark, India, Oman, UK, Ukraine, and all of that stuff. So yes, I mean, this is a very large project, but you don't have to engage in something this big. You can just do it with another institution right there in India, and so on and so forth. So as my students are looking into pictures and seeing these kinds of different classrooms, it itself is a lesson or a learning in global competences. Like, why do all of the male students in Oman wear white? And why do all of the female students in Oman wear black? Why are all the men sitting in the front, women sitting in the back? These kinds of questions are the cultural connotations, or this is a picture from one of the OCLD, Overall Center of Learning and Development, STEP students. I think this was, I don't remember which location, 3 or 4 of the locations joined from my virtual classroom. So for a lot of my American students, they have never even seen, this type of a clothing. So, what is it called? I mean, that kind of just a general awareness or a sense of the world. And one of the things that's very important to me is, we talked about Bloom's taxonomy, is that concept of knowledge co-creation. That means, are we helping students move from lower level of learning to higher level of learning? In my virtual exchange program, I have students, all of the students who are participating from all of these different countries, do presentations, talk about the tourism and hospitality industry in their respective countries. So what that does is that when we talk about, creating knowledge, co-creating knowledge, look at where creation is. It's on the top of the Bloom's taxonomy. That means you are helping students move from a lower level of learning and to a higher level of learning, as they are basically co-creating knowledge and team teaching their peers. So this is a very powerful way of learning, because as you know, that the best way you can learn something is when you teach that same thing to others. So that's a phenomenal way of learning.
Experiential learning.
That's right. And assessment of student learning, like, okay, we are doing this very large project, so what? So we collected a lot of data. We did a lot of research. We collected pre and post data. And what I found very significant is that when students were responding, they said that they would recommend more classes with this kind of a virtual exchange format, and the virtual exchange was a valuable part of this class. So once again, there's an evidence to show that not only this is working, but this is a very powerful pedagogical tool in terms of student learning. And one of the things, of course, this is probably more pertaining to the United States, is that almost all major research universities in the US, we are actually now focusing on how can we build in more diverse perspectives in our curriculum and internationalize the curriculum. I mean, just take, for example, the field of hospitality management. Like, there is so much of, I would say, American brand presence. I mean, if you talk about the largest hotel companies in the world, Hilton, Marriott, or other service providers, Uber, Airbnb, they are all American. So there's too much of emphasis in our curriculum sometimes on things that are American, which is good, but we also need to help our students understand a more international perspective. So this is a great way, the virtual exchange is a great way for our students to actually peek into other classrooms, talk to other students, glean understanding. Like I can tell you, most of my students in Nebraska did not even know where Oman was. I mean, so that was a completely new learning for them. And as much like Pradeep just used the word experiential learning, I am huge in experiential learning and in terms of developing global competencies. Like I take students all over the world for study abroad. So whether we are going to Oman and meeting with federal ministers and learning about the Oman Tourism Strategy 2040, or we are doing tea tasting with a tea sommelier. This is Anamika Singh, her in India. Because tea is an agricultural product here in Nebraska. It's a big agricultural state. So kind of understanding that how basically agritourism works, or we are in Dublin learning about the history of the migration of Ireland, why Ireland has become such a large tourism magnet, or when I take students to Dubai, I always take them for an afternoon tea at the Burj Al Arab, and here is me and my students at the Royal Suite in the Burj Al Arab, which is $35,000 a night. Very few college students in the world can claim that they have set foot in a $35,000 a night suite, because everything in this Royal Suite, right from the ceilings, are real gold. So I'm just saying that this is great. This is great to immerse students in this experiential learning, but this is just not possible. There's no way I can take hundreds and hundreds of students and help them glean these global competencies through study abroad programs. So the virtual exchange works very well in terms of internationalizing the curriculum that way. So that's what we have been able to do through the virtual exchange program, essentially. Pradeep, does that answer your question?
I'm kind of awestruck. I am absolutely, I'm completely bereft of words. What was going on through my mind, Dipro, when you were speaking? In my mind, it was that you have now made the world your classroom. You have cut across geographies, you have cut across demographies, and you have brought everything together at, very importantly, at a most valuable economic proposition. Although you never spoke about that, but the general management thinking in my brain is always moving towards the gross operating profit and the profitability. But it is so fantastic to hear this. Thank you very much. It's an amazing project, and thank you for explaining it to us so lucidly. And Dipro, yeah, sorry, you were saying something. Sorry, please.
Yes, and if I may, you just talked about the impact of all of this stuff. And when I measure the impact in terms of goodwill, I mean, it's incredible. For example, I mean, this group of students from the Ukraine, we send them the certificates for participating in our virtual exchange program, and all of them sent me a group picture thanking me, for sending them the certificates and for letting them participate in this amazing learning initiative. So when we talk about that, we live in a world which is full of a lot of angst and a lot of strife, but here we are actually building bridges among young people because they are the leaders of the future. So there is more going on than just teaching and learning. This is much more powerful. This is much more impactful, because I truly believe that people who understand each other are much less likely to antagonize each other. Does that make sense?
Right. How right you are. Absolutely. Bang on. Bullseye. Very true. And, seeing these beautiful pictures and what you've just now told us, to my mind, I have a feeling that for every academician, single malt is not really the intoxication. This is the intoxication of true appreciation right from the heart region.
Absolutely.
Let me move to my last question. And before I open it up to the audience, actually, how does one really prepare for an online or a virtual classroom? And what are some of the best practices to be kept in mind, Dipro?
Yes, that's a very good question, Pratik. You know, I actually, my experience has been that I need to prepare far more for my online classroom or virtual classroom than my physical classroom, because a physical classroom is more like a theater that I go in, I teach for 45 minutes, so it's like a performance. Of course, I need to prepare for that as well. I need to have a lesson plan, my ropes. I know what I'm going to talk about. I know what guided questions I'm going to be asking, and then I come out of that. But online requires far more preparation because once again, going back to my teaching philosophy, I am trying to help students build skills and competencies for the 21st century. And that's what this pandemic has done, is that you cannot be successful in a 21st century workplace with a 20th century skill set. So whatever you did before this pandemic was great, but now it is time to up your game. And that goes both for instructors and lecturers and professors, as well as the students. And so understanding the platform, like for example, what platform you're going to use. I just learned about GeoMeet, that new platform in India. So the standard ones are, of course, Zoom and Cisco WebEx and Microsoft Teams and Google Meets and all. That's great. I am huge into both digital aesthetics and virtual aesthetics. You have attended several of my webinars, Pratik, and you have seen that I always use a virtual background because,
Absolutely.
it actually enhances the brand proposition. Like right now, my virtual background, I'm using a Washington State University Carson College of Business virtual background. It's a beautiful background. It's both black and white and color and all of that. Understanding that how you are coming in, professional attire and all of that kind of stuff. Also, online communicating, especially in a virtual where students will be able to see you and hear you, is a whole different preparation because here you are just seeing my face. You are not able to see my hands or other body movement. That means like 85% of human communication is non-verbal. That means those non-verbal cues are not there. So how do you make sure that you are still coming across very clear to your students? And that's where I go back to my concepts of storytelling as a pedagogical tool. That are you building a narrative very clearly? Are you chunking it well? Are you scaffolding, like going from a lower level of learning to higher level of learning? That first talking about teaching philosophy before going into the strategy and the Bloom's taxonomy and Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. And of course, understanding what technological limitations you have. Like I am very blessed because since I have been doing these projects, I have a lot of very high-end equipment. I use a 4K camera. Like for example, the microphone headset that I'm using, it has stereo high definition sound. So hopefully all of you should be able to hear me pretty clearly. So, but not everybody, has the means or the resources to be able to do that. And that also brings me to a question that historically colleges and universities have invested a lot of money in physical infrastructure. Now, I think it is important that teachers, lecturers, professors also start asking their universities and institutions to start investing in digital or virtual infrastructure. Because that is very important because students will be expecting a much higher quality of online/virtual teaching and learning. Does that answer your question, Pratik?
Absolutely, absolutely, it does. Absolutely mesmerizing. Thank you so much. And several of the things that you were just now talking about, I always keep on hearing it from my immediate reporting authority, that is my Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Atul Khosla. He is always completely quality conscious. The way you spoke about virtual background, the way you spoke about online delivery, everything syncs. One understands better why he continuously emphasizes upon it. Ladies and gentlemen, considering the fact that I have to sit in front of such an illustrious professor, I did a little bit of a homework last night, and that is what I'm going to be telling you right now. Fasten your seat belts. You will require it this time around. Let me tell you what I did. Last night, I was studying a report by KPMG India and Google, and this report has churned up and thrown up these facts. The global online education market size in 2019 stood at $188 billion. It is growing at a 9.23% CAGR, compounded annual growth rate, and within 2025, $188 billion will reach $320 billion, which is a 70% growth. Let me bring you closer back home to India. The online education market in India currently in 2020 stands at $247 million, Dipro. It is going to grow by 8 times till 2025. And next year, the $247 million is going to reach $1.96 billion by 2021. The current paid user base for online education, Paisa Deke education, is right now standing in India at 1.57 million user, and it is going to grow to 9.5 million user by next year, which is a 44% growth over last year. The internet user base in India currently stands at 409 million, which is about 31% of the population, nothing to write home about. But next year, we are reaching 735 million, which is an 80% growth over last year. The smartphone penetration currently in 2020 stands at 290 million and is expected to grow to 470 million next year, which is a 62% growth over last year. And ladies and gentlemen, last and not the least, India is going to keep on holding its current position as the second largest middle class population till the year 2030. And therefore, sync it with whatever we have just now learned from Dipraja, and you know where the monies are going to be. Dipra, how does that sound to you?
Sure. I mean, I see India as the next horizon for online / virtual teaching and learning. There is such incredible potential. And once again, first mover advantage. People who seizes the opportunity, invests into infrastructure, figures out how to do this well, would actually seize the day. That's the way I think about it.
Very, very lovely the way you say it. There has been a question put up on the chat box by one of our students, Baladitya Singh Saklani, says, "Good evening, sir. Under the present circumstances, online teaching seems a viable alternative, but can it ever replace classroom teaching and experience?"
That's a great question, and thank you for asking that. It is not an either or debate. That whether online teaching can replace. There are places for in-person teaching. There are also very much. There are lots and lots of classes which can actually lend very well to an online teaching and learning format. So once again, when I talked about at the beginning of this presentation, mixed methods instruction, that what classes lend well to in-person learning compared to what you can do through a live synchronous session, and then there are classes which can be taught completely asynchronously. You don't have to meet even virtually or in a virtual space. I mean, students can learn at their own space. So going forward, it is not an either or debate whether online is going to replace physical classroom or not. It is about that all of these things have to move together simultaneously.
Great answer. Thank you so much. Professor Sajnani from Amity has a question. Professor Saab, can you kindly put it on the chat box, or Ankit, can I request you to give speaking rights to Dr. Saab? Dr. Sajnani?
Yes, sir, he can unmute himself, sir.
Yeah, I have unmuted. So Dipra, can
Dr.
you hear
Sajnani,
me?
go ahead. Thank you very much for being with us this evening.
Very good
Am I
evening,
audible?
You're audible, sir. You're audible, sir. Go right ahead.
Dipra, good evening, and thanks for having a wonderful session like every time. Very amazing, full of knowledge. Professor Dipra, I have a very simple question. See, for any student of hospitality, I've got conventionally, traditionally, two important components. One is the chalk and talk, my brick and mortar, environment, and second is my on-the-job training. This has been over so many years, and in the absence of simulating techniques as of now in India, we do not have. Though we have in US and good part of the world, but in India we do not have. So in the absence of simulating techniques or tools, how and what would you like to recommend for students to get hands-on training?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question that Dr. Sajnani just asked. Like, in absence of a simulating environment, how do you actually train students? There is no simple answer to that, sir. I hope that that there will be a lot of investment. There are a lot of startups in India who will start developing simulating softwares or learning softwares and all of that stuff. I mean, many times I am asked questions about that, whether it is possible to actually teach somebody, say our hospitality management students, can you teach students how to, say, for example, a culinary class? Like, how can you teach students how to chop onions? Like, is it possible to do that virtually? And I say yes. And the example of that is pilots. Pilots do not train in a live airplane. They train in a simulator. Nobody gives a pilot a $200 million airplane and tell them go fly, or learn flying. That's not how it happens. So they sit in a simulator, do it over and over and over and over again. And after thousands and hours of simulation training, their muscle memory kicks in. And I am actually, my next project at Washington State, I'll be working with some very big name tech companies to figure out if we can use VR, virtual reality in hospitality, to create that kind of stuff. So, for example, the chef instructor can be at Amity University, on campus, and then the students are all their home. They are wearing the VR glasses just like they play video games. So it's basically a video game for chopping onions, So instead of doing it live, they're doing it, virtually. But the same thing, once they practice it over and over and over again, then muscle memory kicks in and they will be able to do it. We are not there yet, but just like anything else, like look at that. Like, we are also right at the beginning of of some of this stuff. Like, I'm sure probably a year or 2 years from now, it will be much harder for somebody to break into a Zoom session like this, like somebody did today, and do a Zoom bombing, because security is going to become much better. And let me tell you that I have been using Zoom for more than 4 or 5 years now. They have become infinitely better, but we are still going through the teething troubles of some of this stuff. So basically, bottom line, to answer Professor Sajnani's question, it's a very, very valid question. We do not have all of the answers yet, but I'm sure we will figure out.
Professor Dipra, in your virtual exchange, Professor Majumdar, I am asking another question. Sorry.
Please do, Dr. Saab. Please do.
Because in your virtual exchange, program, do you have some, environment where these kind of sessions can be joined by the students from Shoolini University, from Amity, or from other universities, where we are connected with the professors delivering such lectures, on online mode or on the remote learning mode?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, like I said, in India, the Oberoi Center of Learning and Development is one of my partners. I already have somebody joining in. So I am not going to offer the virtual classroom this fall semester because I'm starting in a new position. So once I figure all of these things out, because there is a time change, because Washington is on the West Coast, so the time difference will increase by 2 hours. So I have to figure out with all of my international partners. Absolutely. So going forward, Amity or Shoolini or any of these institutions would be more than welcome to join my virtual exchange cohort in the future, we have to figure out what classes lend well, what, who is going to be the corresponding faculty at your end, and all of that stuff. But once again, I mean, we can definitely discuss all of that. Thank you for asking, Professor Sajnani.
Can I ask one last small question? I'm just like you, I'm a teacher. So I'm full of curiosity, asking and learning from you, experiential learning. Professor Jha, keeping in view the Indian academic environment or teaching learning processes in our Indian universities, you rightly said we cannot carry on 21st century with 20th century skill sets. We cannot. So, when it comes to pedagogical tools, what immediate remedy do you suggest? That we can cope with the this sudden development which has come, which otherwise would have come in 2024 or 2025, and we are now in that stage. And what changes you can suggest which are immediate?
Yes, first of all, looking at
So I
best
think Dr.
practices.
Sajnani is asking for some low-hanging fruits.
Yeah, yes.
The immediate planning is in the process, but immediately the batches have joined in, and the senior batches have joined in, and we should not deprive them of what they actually are hoping for and they are aiming at.
Dr. Sajnani, sir, I will, with your permission, I will interrupt. Deepra will ask for a quick answer to this because we are moving across a time challenge here, and there are 2 more questions waiting. So please go right ahead.
Sorry.
No problem, Dr. Sajnani. No problem.
Sir. Yeah.
No problem, sir.
The quick answer to that is, create these small chunking learning models for the faculty or the instructors. And there is a lot of resources online. For example, they can just go take a free class on Coursera from one of like for example, a class that I can think of is called The Psychology of Learning by Yale University. That's free. It's a MOOC. I mean, they can actually see the pedagogical tools that's being used by that professor, and once again, it is not that they have to imitate or copy the whole thing, but adapt and adapt whatever works. So, but yes, you are absolutely right, Professor Sajnani, that, pedagogy is also a mindset because if you have been teaching in a certain way, like physical classroom your entire life, how do you quickly pivot to this virtual environment? It's not that easy because, just like that's why we are seeing, like I always talk about how these large brands like JCPenney has been around for more than 100 years in the United States, just went bankrupt,
Absolutely.
So I'm just saying that you can't even imagine that a company that has been around for 103 years will not be able to make it in the new environment. And so the same thing is happening in higher education. Lot of disruption, people who are not paying very close attention, unfortunately, their skill set will become redundant very soon. It's a scary thought, but I always tell my students, if you are not keeping ahead of the curve will leave you behind.
True, very true. In fact, I'd like to actually mention that here at Shoolini University, our senior leadership has actually mandated the usage of Coursera as well as EDX courses, not only for faculty, but even for students. So everyone across the line is expected to do some course or the other and upskill, which is a great thing. Abhishek Sharma, a wonderful friend from ITC Hotels and one time my student and thereafter my colleague, asks a question. Good evening, sir. Please ask, will virtual learning increase the time taken to complete certain courses?
I don't think so. On the contrary, I think virtual learning could help shorten the time taken because online/virtual learning also can create an environment where the student can learn at their own pace. So like this Coursera courses I'm talking about, this Yale University course on positive psychology, I mean, you can take it any time. So like, if you have a block of 4 hours, you can sit and go through that course and accomplish a lot in that, that 4 hours time. This is not like a traditional class where it meets for 50 minutes or 75 minutes, and that it only is bound by a time frame of semester and so on and so forth. So I actually believe that online/virtual learning is going to shorten time frame of, in terms of achieving the same learning outcomes.
Fantastic. My dear schoolmate, Dr. Derek D'Souza from Pune, asks a very pointed question. Hear it out very carefully, everyone. With many of our students back home, homes without laptop or without stable or reliable data network, digital learning and teaching is a huge challenge for us as administrators. Can Professor Dipro give us his views and suggestions to ensure true social justice and reach out to the last link in the chain?
Yeah, that's an incredibly important question. And it is not only in India, even in the United States, there are many inner city schools where students do not have access to laptops or reliable bandwidth and so on and so forth. It is actually a social justice issue, as Dr. D'Souza has pointed out. So once again, hopefully, one of these things, this pandemic it's a black swan event. That means, nobody could predict it. And when black swan events like this happens, usually a lot of innovation comes out of it. Like I always remind people that when the financial crisis of 2008 happened, the two unicorns that came out of the financial crisis are Uber and Airbnb. So I am actually looking forward to actually having similar kinds of unicorns who will figure out how to deliver digital learning to that last mile, to that kid who is in rural India, who doesn't have access to a 1 gig internet bandwidth and so on and so forth. How can we deliver to them? These are very pertinent questions, but we do not have the answers to these questions as of now. But it is great to keep asking these questions so that they're in the forefront of our minds.
Dipro, we'll take a last question from my colleague, Chef Nagendra Yadav, who's my kitchen instructor colleague. And he asks another very relevant question: how to take advantage of social isolation generated by COVID-19 to boost transition from face-to-face education to remote education?
Yeah, that's also a very, very good question. What actually does is social isolation many times also creates the hunger for engagement or to be with other people. So if you actually, in one of my slides, I talked about how we should be creating very engaging virtual or online classrooms. Like this goes right back to pedagogy. Like when you are designing your classes, your online classes, how do you create an environment where people feel engaged? They are just not passive listeners. And passive listening can happen even in a physical classroom, as you know, that people who sit in the last rows of the class, they can tune out very easily. So that's a very, very good question. And that comes right back to pedagogy. There are lots of tools in terms of how you can create engagement, whether it is through discussion boards, and online forums and so on and so forth, so that the learning becomes much more engaged, and students, though they are physically separate, feels connected in the digital world.
Thank you very much, Dipro. That was quite amazing, actually. Dipro, we have now pretty much drawn to the close of this very intriguing and interesting webinar. A few parting shots as far as I am concerned. Eye-opener of a webinar, and I'm sure many of my audience hosts will agree with me. You're going to be very happy to know that our mutual friend Sangeeta Gandhi, Vice President at OCLD, is very much present on this webinar, attending it with us. And my mentor, my teacher, Mr. Arun Agarwal, he has blessed us by being present on this webinar. On behalf of Shoolini University and my Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Prem Khosla, my President of the Board, Mrs. Saroj Khosla, my Pro-Vice Chancellor, Professor Atul Khosla, thank you very, very much for taking out your time, Dipro. Many, many thanks for teaching us so many wonderful new things. Dear audience, thank you so much for participating and taking out your time on a Wednesday evening. Have a beautiful evening right now. Enjoy your dinner and have a splendid and delightful night. Bye-bye, Indro. Bye-bye, Dipro, and have a wonderful day, because the day is starting for you. Thank you very much, and God bless again.
Thank you so much, Pradeep.
Thank you, Ankit, for supporting.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
We can switch off, Ankit.